Oh, thank you, Tina. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this webinar. My name is Kathleen Jia. I'm an internal medicine physician who recently joined the Sean Parker Center as a clinician. So I'm very excited to work with this group of people and very excited to talk about our topic today, which is food allergies across the world. So we'll start with a quick poll question. Were you born or have you ever lived in a foreign country? So yes or no. You can please answer the quick poll. Great. So it looks like about half of you have. So this is just a quick question to see, hopefully to be an interesting and relevant topic. Let's see. Okay. So why did I decide to talk about this topic? So first of all, food allergies are becoming more common globally. It's becoming a raising healthcare concern. And contrary to some common beliefs, it is actually fairly common in both developed and developing countries. The top allergens across countries are quite similar, especially among young children. However, there are some regional differences of food allergies based on diet and environmental exposures. So maybe we'll back up a little bit and talk about what exactly is a food allergy. So food allergies are quite commonly confused with food intolerance. When we think about, for example, people that take milk or dairy products and develop some abdominal pain and diarrhea and bloating, they usually have lactose intolerance. And that involves an enzyme deficiency in the gut, so they cannot digest lactose, and that causes the symptoms. The same with having Asian flush, for example, people that drink alcohol and develop facial flushing and headaches and nausea. That's due to a lack of or an underperforming enzyme in the liver that cannot process metabolites of alcohol, which leads to those symptoms. Those are all food intolerances. Celiac disease is also closer to a food intolerance, even though it is an autoimmune process. It involves T cells and immunoglobulins called IgA and IgG. So those, even though it's an autoimmune process, is closer to a food intolerance. People with food intolerance can generally have small amounts of the food without too much issue, and it's usually not a life-threatening disease. Food allergy, on the other hand, involves inappropriate immunoglobulins called IgE, and they react to food that are normally benign, and they trigger a series of reactions that happen within minutes to hours of a food exposure. And these reactions can be life-threatening, such as anaphylaxis. So how much do we know about food allergies across the world? Well, unfortunately, not as much as we can. Why is that? Well, unfortunately, it is actually quite difficult to conduct large-scale food allergy studies. The most accurate way to diagnose food allergy is with an oral food challenge. However, these are quite costly and logistically challenging to do, and also much riskier for the participants. So most of our food allergy epidemiology studies are based on self or parental reporting, which substantially overestimates the true food allergy prevalence, sometimes by as much as 3 to 4 folds. And these surveys, as you can imagine, are quite influenced by temporal trends, how much the public is aware of food allergies and how much the parents and the subjects might be aware of food allergies. There's also a substantial lack of data in older children and adults, and lack of data in some countries altogether, or maybe under-resourced, or just doesn't have the public health structure to support something like this. So we'll start with a global survey of food allergy. This was done in 2012, conducted by the World Allergy Organization. They sent surveys to all their member societies and their surrounding regions. And their goal was to collect information on global patterns and prevalence of food allergies in children. So this survey only pertains to children 18 or younger. And most results are based on parental or self-reported questionnaires only. So the first graph here shows results from children who are 5 years or younger. And as you can see, there's 3 color bars here. The black indicates studies that are done with oral food challenge, so it's supposedly the most accurate. The gray are studies done by symptom reporting and sensitization tests, such as skin prick testing. And then the beige color bars are studies that use surveys only. And they had results from 16 out of the 89 regions. As you can see, the most common, the highest prevalence country is Australia, coming in about 10% prevalence in preschool children and for food allergies, followed by Finland, Canada, Norway, and China, coming in surprisingly at around 7%. And the US is slightly below that, around 7-8%. So it's quite high for China, as you can see. In the other countries, quite a few Northern European and North American countries. This graph here shows food allergy prevalence for children of all ages as compared to the last one, which is only 5 or younger. So across all ages 0 through 18 years old. The data here, so you can see, is mostly dependent on parental reporting and survey data only. And interestingly, the UK comes in first at about 17 to 18% prevalence for all children, followed by Colombia, Finland, Lithuania, etc. And the US comes in at around 8%. So overall findings from this survey is that the prevalence of food allergy in children 0 to 18 years old is somewhere between 1 to 10%, depending on the region. And there's higher prevalence in younger children. The most common food allergens in children less than 5 years old were similar across all regions and includes cow's milk and egg. And these 2 allergens usually tend to resolve with age. So as the kids get older, their allergies to milk and egg tend to resolve. Peanuts, tree nuts, fish, and shellfish allergies are more common in older age groups, and these usually do not resolve with age and persist into adulthood. Unfortunately, there is a globally increasing prevalence of self-reported food allergy at about a rate of 1.2% per decade. And there's studies showing increasing prevalence in East Asia, the US, and Africa. For example, a Chinese study showed there was a doubling of oral food challenge proven food allergies from 3.5% to 7.7% over the period of a decade. So definitely some concerning findings. So this is a second epidemiology study that was published in 2017, so a little bit more updated. I just wanted to show kind of a color graphic of this. As you can see, the darker red colors shows higher prevalence of food allergy in that country. And the data that they based all this from is kind of listed at the bottom. There's higher prevalence, as you can see, in Northern Europe, North America, as well as Asia, and also some countries like Chile and Australia. And notably, all the studies listed are conducted in children 0 to 17 years old, with the exception of the Netherlands, which has a study in 11 to 20-year-olds, and Kuwait, which has a study in 17 to 30-year-olds. All right, so a little bit more specifically about each region. So the US conducted a survey in 2010, which sent surveys to all households, and they found that the overall food allergy prevalence in adults and children was about 8%. Of those who reported food allergies, 30% had multiple food allergies, and the most common reported one was peanut, followed by milk and shellfish. The top 8 food allergens in the US are listed there. In Europe, there was a meta-analysis done in 2014, which showed that the pooled lifetime self-reported allergen prevalence was the highest for milk, followed by wheat and egg. And interestingly, food allergens to fruits, such as apple and kiwi, are also more common in Europe compared to other areas of the world. And that's thought to be kind of cross-reaction to pollen. Australia is a country with one of the highest rates of food allergy. It's about 10% prevalence in children at 12 months old and 4 to 5% prevalence in adolescents. And the most common food allergen is egg, followed by peanuts, milk, and sesame seed. And interestingly, at least for me, peanuts and tree nuts are more common as a food allergen in the US, the Western Europe, and Australia as compared to other areas of the world. Just to quickly go over developing countries, the prevalence of food allergy range varies quite widely. It can be 1 to 7% in Asia, 1.2% in a study done in India, about 2.5 to 3% in South Africa based on a couple of studies, and as high as 5 to 19% in some parts of Africa. And just a few things that I thought was quite interesting from what I read. Chickpea is a major food allergen in India just because of how much legumes they consume. In Thailand, the top allergen is shrimp, not surprisingly, and also ant eggs. I guess that's part of some people's diet there. And then in Singapore, there's some unique food allergens such as bird's nest, royal jelly, and buckwheat, also because of their diet. So why is this happening? Why are people developing more food allergies? What are some risk factors for developing food allergies? Well, first of all, there's definitely a big component genetically. We do know that patients with a family history of atopic disease, such as eczema, asthma, allergic rhinitis, etc., are at a higher risk for developing food allergy. So there's a lot of genetic factors at play. For example, there is a mutation in a protein called flagrin that's associated with eczema and peanut allergy. And flagrin is a protein in the skin, and it's important for making the skin a very good barrier. So mutations in flagrin can cause a defective skin barrier, which would increase your risk for eczema. And there's multiple studies showing that infants can be sensitized to peanuts through their defective skin barrier in infants with eczema, and that in turn increases the risk for peanut allergy. Ethnicity also seems to play a big role in development of food allergies as well. Studies have shown that children of East Asian or African descent who are born in Western environments are at a higher risk for developing food allergy compared to their Caucasian counterparts. A US survey done in ERs in Chicago in the Midwest showed that there's higher rates of food-induced anaphylaxis among Black and Hispanic children as opposed to non-Hispanic white children. And another study done in Australia showed that Asian children born in Australia are more likely to have a nut allergy compared to non-Asian children born in Australia or children born in Asia who then later immigrates to Australia. So there's a great interaction between ethnicity, genetics, and kind of the environmental exposures in early childhood. Other environmental factors can include house dust mite exposure, which has been shown to sensitize people to shellfish allergies. There's also some climate factors, things like a high latitude in your country, which, less sun exposure and lower vitamin D levels may be associated with developing food allergies. If you can recall, there's higher rates of food allergies in Northern European countries. Urbanization has also been thought to be associated with food allergies due to decreased microbial exposure and antibiotic use, which in turn affects the gut microbiome. And it's thought that the intestinal microbiome is very important to maintaining tolerance towards food allergens. So disruptions of that can increase risk of food allergy. There's also differences in culinary and diet practices. Some studies have shown that roasted peanuts are more allergenic than other forms of peanuts. And excluding food allergens from the diet actually increases your risk for the food allergy, while regular consumption of this food in early childhood can elicit a protective immune response. And there's been studies showing that for infants who are at higher risk for peanut allergy, regular consumption of small amounts of peanut from 4 to 6 months old can protect the infant from developing a peanut allergy. So in conclusion, I think we have multiple studies and surveys have shown that food allergies are becoming more common globally, and it's becoming an increasing healthcare concern, as well as increased healthcare burden and costs. And this trend is affecting both developed and developing countries. There's increasing rates in East Asia and Africa, especially as these countries are becoming more urbanized. And we do need more robust studies over time that are needed to better understand and address this concern and develop more prevention strategies for food allergies. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for coming. We do want to thank Tina and Angela for hosting the webinar. And we do have some awesome studies that we have listed here going on at the Sean Parker Center. So if you're interested, please contact us. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jia. So I have a few questions here. One in the chat box is, why are food allergies increasing in incidence? I have been an allergist over 40 years and we do not see that much of food allergy in the 1980s.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I did try to address that a little bit in my presentation. I think it's thought to be, kind of the changing diet patterns, as well as, increasing urbanization and migration patterns. That's thought to be kind of the main reasons why it's becoming more common, but there's still a lot unknown. As we talked about, there is not great epidemiology studies in food allergies. So we actually don't know too much about the natural history of food allergies, especially as people get older, since there's not that much information about it. But those are kind of the main reasons that I've discovered.
Thank you. The next question is, it seems to be a continuation of misinformation about food allergy. For instance, what is the data for chickpea allergy from India? I think it's old and it's from Mumbai. There's newer data, and again, maybe not correct in other parts of India. How critically should we read those studies?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And like I said, I think a lot of the data we have are based on survey data. So patients or families who are not familiar with exactly what are food allergies versus a food intolerance might get confused about that. And so that's why the surveys tend to grossly overestimate what the true prevalence of a food allergy is. So we do need to take those studies with a grain of salt, and those survey data, we probably should really, interpret them in the correct light. So that's a great point, that we do need to kind of evaluate these studies critically, knowing that the survey data would grossly overestimate the true prevalence. But unfortunately, we do not have a lot of very accurate data with oral food challenge testing, which is the gold standard. So, we do have to use the data we have. And even the survey data that we do have do show increasing prevalence over time. So that would be a reflection that there is something there, though we may not know the true answer. And that's why we do need more studies and kind of more public education and awareness about what is a food allergy versus, food intolerance, what are life-threatening symptoms and signs versus those that are not life-threatening. So it's a lot of need for public education, as well as increasing and better research in this topic.
So another question I have is, what are the latest developments for food allergy vaccines?
That's a great question. I think there are some talks about vaccines or injections for peanut allergies. Fortunately, they're no FDA approvals, but there are some studies going on, and I think trials and research around this.
Thank you. Another question we have here is, can we separate avoiding tolerance versus sensitization?
Sorry, can you clarify that question? Avoiding tolerance versus sensitization. Not quite sure.
One second. Let me find. Rick, I'm going to allow you to talk if you can unmute.
Thank you, and thank you for the talk, Dr. G. It's a challenge for me. I mean, I was born in 1949, so I've been around a while, but it seems like some of the challenges have been that we are avoiding tolerance by thinking we should not feed people peanuts or tree nuts at a young age. And so then all of a sudden we have people measuring IgE antibodies using a lot of different techniques, and sometimes people are just using any quote unquote sensitization as a mark of allergy. And I think that maybe we've kind of gone awfully far in sort of safety without thinking about missing tolerance.
Yeah, exactly. You bring up a great point. I think, in the 1990s, early 2000s, the thought was, we should avoid food allergies, right? If we think we're allergic to something, we shouldn't eat it at all. But that thought has turned out to be not ideal. And like some of the studies have shown, if you avoid a food allergen altogether, that might actually put you at higher risk for developing that allergy. And if you try to introduce some food allergen by mouth early in infancy or childhood, such as the peanuts, then that would create some protection for you against developing that food allergy. So there's kind of an increasing thought that we should introduce food allergens, or foods that are at higher risk for becoming an allergen, try to introduce those early in childhood. And like you mentioned, skin sensitization to a food allergen does not equal actual reaction to it when you ingest it by mouth. And kind of the IgE levels and those kind of things, there's signs of sensitization, but that also does not mean that you're truly allergic to a food if you ingest it. So that's why the oral food challenge is really the gold standard in diagnosing a true food allergy. So thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Dr. Jia. A couple more here. One says, what country is doing the best job at labeling as well as information on menus in restaurants? Do you know?
Yeah, so I think, based on what I read, the European Union actually has a pretty good system. So they have a requirement that there's, I think, the list of 14 food allergens, common food allergens that are required to be labeled at restaurants and on menus. So you visit those countries, that's kind of a requirement by the EU government to do that. So I think in general, based on what I've read and seen, I think the EU is doing a better job in general of kind of putting those food allergies on the menu and more public awareness of that.
And I think we have time for one more question. It says, is GMO food a contributor to increasing food allergy?
That is a good question. I think that's something we don't know enough about. I don't think I've seen any studies look at this specifically. So I think that's, would be an interesting topic to look into. I think there's some maybe thoughts and speculations about this, but I think it will be, an interesting topic, and I can look into that and get back to you as well. Oh, and Rick says GMOs do not. So, okay, well, thank you for that comment.
All right, I think we are good. Thank you, Dr. Jia, and thank you everybody who attended this webinar. I'll have this link live or the recording posted on our Facebook page.
Okay, thank you.